Good afternoon, good morning. Today is Monday, April 18th. Let's set our intention, make aspirations by saying the four measurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So we'll meditate, and Victoria is going to speak on a particular topic. I'll let her elaborate on what she's going to speak about. But I just wanted to say, most of you, I believe, have been doing this class for a while. This may have been your first class, it may have been not your first class or whatever. If it was your first class and you've been doing it a while, or you were doing it before, either way, you've been doing this consistently. And I think it's important to remember that I think we can get caught up sometimes in results, especially, if we think of this, we're working toward enlightenment or so. I mean, in some ways, I don't even think that's something we have to concern ourselves with, But this basic practice that we're doing, and if it's something that we're doing very consistently, which it seems most of us are here, that is the path, that's a spiritual path. And in some ways, you can keep that very simple. The teachings in Buddhism are very, very, very vast, and you should study and you should find a teacher and attend teachings and look at many teachers from authentic lineages that inspire you and books that inspire you. But in terms of what we're doing, what are we doing? Is the big question. And saying we're trying to attain enlightenment or reach some kind of goal often misses the point. I think what we're trying to do really is get to know who we are and figure out who we are and what we are and why we are. So the practice of meditation and looking at the mind and how your mind works, being on this path, you will do that if you do this consistently and in a very basic way and a very simple way. Whatever practice we're doing here, looking at the mind, that's going to become a certain point of view that's going to happen, not just on the cushion, but I'm sure, and I know because I've heard from you, that this begins to work in life. So you begin to start looking at how your mind is working in your life. And you're beginning to see why your mind responds to certain situations. I'm not talking about going to, I'm not talking about even therapy, which is fine, and you should do that if that's what you feel like. I'm not saying, this person reminds me of my father, and that's why I have these issues. I'm not going there. I'm just saying in the moment you feel angry because your ego is threatened or your kind of image of yourself is threatened or your physical being is threatened, just constantly seeing what is going on in a very immediate, very clear, very, very, very basic way. I'm responding to this person because they make me feel competitive. I'm jealous of them because of their achievements or something. And you know what I mean? It's like becoming aware of these little momentary things that happen over and over and over and over again, and that have happened and have been our default mechanism for forever. And just all we're doing is starting to see that. We're just starting to see that and how it plays out. We're not looking to, we're not looking to unravel, like I said, in a kind of psychotherapeutic way. Basically, we're looking at it in terms of, from a Buddhist point of view, it all happens because we don't know the truth. We don't know our true nature, right? We see things in terms of dualism and I and them and separation. And by starting to see that bigger picture, by starting to see how that plays out, how that works with us, something else starts to happen. And I'm not even going to say what that is. I'm not even sure if I know what that is. Um, but certainly it is a progress toward honesty, with ourselves. And as Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche says all the time, basic sanity. You know, we don't need to talk about ethical discipline has to be part of a spiritual path, but you and I all know what that is. That's not a big mystery on what's a negative action and what's a positive action. If you're really starting to take some kind of honest look at yourself over time on a regular basis. With that in mind, let's meditate. Why don't we start with the so all I'm saying is, have confidence that, committing to this practice is being on the path. You're not waiting for some big revelation or some big, you know, credential or something to come down and saying you're doing, you may want to take refuge and become a Buddhist with a certain teacher. I really encourage that, if you are inspired to, and I'm always encourage you finding teachers. I'm not going counter to that, saying you don't need to do that. I'm just saying, have confidence that this is an authentic path, the type of meditation you've been committing to, and not only the type of meditation, but committing to that as a practice and as something very consistent and as a part of your life. That is, you are on the path if you're doing that. Let's start with the 9 purifying breaths, which we start with the right hand. The right forefinger goes to the left nostril. We're breathing into the right. If you remember this, we're working with the 3 subtle body channels. The middle one is blue. The right in the male is white. The red in the female is the left. Again, that's for you to decide how you want to do that. That's not stamped in stone, and that should be um, your own definition on how you want to see that. To the left, breathe in. We're breathing in. The channel actually goes from the nostrils to the back of the head, down the back. And all 3 channels will join at the navel and will hold there. And then out. So we're aerating this subtle body channel that actually has to do with anger. In my case, I'm doing anger because it's the white. If you were doing the red, we're dealing with a subtle body channel that where the poison of attachment operates, and we're aerating that, purifying it. We'll move to the central channel, blue. is a channel where the poison of ignorance operates. And ignorance, we're meaning uh, ignorance of not knowing our true nature, not knowing the truth. So the truth of our existence and the truth of reality, really, the ultimate sense of reality. We breathe through both nostrils, go to the same place, to the navel. And we're clearing out that ignorance and to make room for wisdom. On the third out breath, we'll breathe it in, we'll hold through the blue channel, out through the crown, merging our consciousness with space, and then go right into 9 minutes of meditation. Excellent. Um, you're we're really focusing. The breath is such the anchor. In the practice, and the breath is almost like a snapshot of what your mind is doing if you really pay attention to it. And here we're not really doing anything physical besides breathing, but you see how much the breath supports the process, or the state of meditation. um, and using that, the breath naturally goes into that ease and consistency, and um, a certain pace that's meditative. Breath, it's so important even on a physical level. Like if you do martial arts or something, every move is supported by the breath to make it strong, to make it proper, to make it effective. um, it's just amazing how much of what we do, it's really the base thing of what we do on a physical level is breathe. Without it, you can go a while without food and water and stuff, but not without the breath, obviously. And what I was saying before about this practice, and have faith that you are on this path. There's something, I don't mean faith in terms of believing in anything. I mean faith in terms of your commitment as a human being to this uncovering of yourself, which I think is very, very, very courageous and very difficult, and takes a lot of diligence, and is something very admirable. And that you're not waiting to do this, you are doing it. We're not waiting for a sign. We're not waiting for some thing that's going to crack open. This is it. This is the practice. And I read something today in this book. This is the path is the goal. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. It's a really good book, really, on meditation. Where he says, the practice of meditation really goes against everything we've habituated ourselves to, right? So you're in your apartment, you're in your house. If you weren't meditating, there's lots of other things you may fill your time with, most of which you in some ways have habituated yourself to. There's a default thing that the mind has to go to these familiar places, and that can go to very extreme places like addiction and things like that. But he says even after 20 years, meditation is difficult. It's not necessarily always a struggle. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's we feel it to be something difficult, or we perceive it as such, because it goes against that habitual thing of the mind just running away with itself, which we've done from a Buddhist point of view for countless lifetimes and eons. But you're breaking that, something very powerful in that. Okay, with that, we will have Victoria do. If you just want to introduce the topic, because I forgot to mention that before.
I really just thought it would be important. I mean, we just finished such a big practice, the 37 Bodhisattva practices that gave us everything. It gave us the view, it gave us, obstacles as we take them on the path. It gave us everything about the path. It was a complete practice. So we had a lot of information to digest, and I just wanted to focus on just two things, really. One is to talk a little bit about the nature of our awareness, because we often refer to it as emptiness, but it's not simply that. And then I wanted to speak about just kind of physical mechanisms to go to deal with difficult emotions, because I think that's where it's difficult for all of us. We tend to repeat the same behaviors, and we feel that often there's nothing that we can do, that there are circumstances that are outside of us that create certain circumstances to which we have to react in a habitual manner, and we cannot break these patterns and these behaviors, as Michael said. Those kinds of behaviors and patterns are addictions. Addictions don't have to be only physical. Physical addictions are the more gross fact, calcification of mental addictions. And so, what to do, how to recognize them, how to head them off at the pass, how not to go down the wrong road. So, wanted to just speak a little bit about these two things, hoping always to speak about things that are beneficial, because these are the things that we discuss often and we meditate on. So I was thinking in how to really talk about our awareness. I mean, Buddhist teaching is very vast. Buddha gave 84,000 kinds of teaching that has all these 84,000 pieces have to do with parts of mind, because everything is mind, because our world is all experience. It's not things out there or in here, it's all about experience. So I thought that a simple analogy would be to think of our life. I mean, if we were really kind of at a glance look at it, which is our life is our mind, because it's always experience. There is no state where the mind does not go. And the mind never stops. It's a continuous flow. It's a continuous river. Even when we sleep, the mind is working and is changing us and is taking us somewhere. If you were to imagine a large film theater with lots of different films going on it. So in one theater, I am the mother. In another theater, I work at this job. In another theater, I do this kinds of charity work. In another movie theater, I'm doing my dissertation. In this movie theater, I'm fighting with my parents. All these movies that are going on simultaneously in this one movie theater. And the reason why it's a single movie theater is because through all these narratives, through all these stories, the I goes through all of them. So I, whoever I am, I string all these stories together. I go in and out of them. Some stories become obsolete. For example, our children grow up and they leave our house. I am not the same kind of a parent. Or, the scenario where I am a daughter, and my parents are both deceased when we get old, and that's, of course, something that happens inevitably to all of us. That narrative has to end, and we have to write some other kind of narrative. If you think about our mind, our life, as this kind of movie theater where stories are constantly written, we write them, we enact them, and we string them together, but it's a movie theater that doesn't really have walls. It's also a movie theater in which stories arise and cease depending on the changes in our life, how our situation happens. And what I want to point to is we always talk about the nature of mind in terms of emptiness, or selflessness is a much better word. Why? Because in this movie theater, that's our awareness. That movie theater is endless possibility. It's the energy of anything to be able to happen. And the other part of it is luminosity. So in Buddhism, our mind is defined as union of emptiness and luminosity. So these endless potentialities, endless scenarios which we can write and enact, endless new paths that we can carve for ourselves and do. There's also luminosity. Our mind is like a flashlight in a dark room, just like the camera projector. There's a lamp that projects the film on the screen. Our mind does both of these things. So the mind is always talked about in terms of emptiness and luminosity. And please think of emptiness as this space within which all these new things can happen. Even the old calcified things that you have now, you have created. They have arisen from something that wasn't there before. you became a nurse, or you became a father, or you became a this and a that. You're training in the to fly into space, or you're learning a new language. These possibilities arise from your mind, from the flashlight being lit into some corner of a dark room and saying, I want to do this, I want to learn this, I want to become this. And then you start creating that story. This is really what we are, and this is really how we have to think of ourselves. We are kind of this constant flux of creating, dissolving, and creating again and again, and shining the lamp. So the way that we experience the world is that we shine the lamp of our awareness onto something, and then it's in our field of vision. We are aware of it. But what I want to point to, this aspect of emptiness, is the vast size, the scope of that space that's filled with the light of our awareness. It's much bigger than the theater with the narratives, which is our conceptual mind. That's kind of our ordinary, normal mind within which we identify, within which we move. And we need it, of course, because we need that mind. But remember that everything that is written in that conceptual mind is also taken out of emptiness, out of that vastness. Everything great in our life, all the poetry, all the music, all the new things, every eureka moment is taken by mind out of this great vastness and then put into the movie theater, where we put something on the loop and we continue in the behavioral way. So please, we've been talking a lot about it, and talking about the vastness of the awareness, and then the mind, the relative mind, which we need to function in the world. Because if our shirt is on fire, we need to know how to put it out. But maybe at one point in our life as humans, we didn't have shirts, and it took that kind of like the shining of the lamp in the dark room and taking it from this emptiness and creating it. So all of that, has to arise out of a bigger space. Awareness is much larger and encapsulates our conceptual ordinary mind. So keeping that always in mind. And with that, we can kind of like move on to try to figure out what happens, within which mind do negative emotions stir, and what is meditation? How do we use meditation to deal with ordinary events? Because meditation is there for us in order for us to change, to alter, to bring about different outcomes, to alter the things with which we don't necessarily want to live, and also really to expand our consciousness. How do we gain bigger space and not, just these, 5-6 different narratives from which we run from one room to the next. I am the mother, I am the nurse, I am the this worker, I am the this, we in meditation, we're trying to get at the other space, the space that encapsulates that little narrative, which is strung by the eye. So meditation has many, many different kinds of meanings, but I would say for now, as a kind of a functioning thing, I would say that awareness is something that always recognizes its source. In other words, does our energy, because awareness is energy, awareness are not labels, awareness is energy. Awareness moves us to do things. Awareness creates the labels. Awareness does everything else. Awareness is the doing thing. Labels are labels. That's what we store in our kind of a conceptual library, and we defer to it. Often these labels become like parachutes, or they become very tiny and they suffocate us. But think of awareness in terms of energy, impetus. Meditation is something that knows awareness and knows the source of our energy. Does our energy come from the small movie theater of the ego, the conceptual mind? Or is it more spacious and we step out of that little narrative or narratives that are strung together, and we feel our awareness and we function out of a bigger space? I think meditation is definitely an aspect of it is to know the source. It's to know who we are. And the other one, the other meaning of meditation is, and something that we try to do through meditation, something that meditation becomes synonymous with, is that once we discover that space, the greater space of awareness that holds the ordinary mind, we try to stay within that. We try to be steady, and we try to not be, because within that small bubble of conceptual mind is where the ego energy is encapsulated. The ego energy with with the five afflictive emotions. One of them is really not emotion, it's ignorance. And so the primary thing of meditation is to know about our awareness, is to know the source, to counter the ignorance. Ignorance is not to be thought of in judgmental terms. Ignorance is not something that's good or bad or like this or like that. Ignorance is like being born blind. So when we don't have teachers and we don't have teachings, we don't know about the space of the greater awareness. So we often think we are confined only to this kind of a small conceptual ordinary mental realm, and often we become very claustrophobic, and that space causes us a lot of suffering. So this is what we do with meditation. We recognize the nature of awareness. We see the nature of ordinary mind encapsulated in it, and we know that we can function out of the bigger self, out of the bigger awareness. We can withstand the force of that small narrative of the movie theater, because we also know as practitioners, we know that the movie theater is impermanent, because nothing is really stable. It's not there. By the time I spoke the sentence, I've already changed. We also know that everything is interconnected, and so when one part changes, the other part of the narrative inside the movie, one of the stories, will change again. As I said, one day we are children, and the next day our parents die, and the narrative has to be readjusted. And that is something, that really is descriptive of everything that happens to us all the time. Not to be pessimistic, but just to have some degree of realism. So within that smaller conceptual mind is that I that strings all of these things together, and we need the mere I, because we need to know whose briefcase it is, who has to go to work, who has to put out the fire on the kid's shirt, and who needs to function. We need that. But then there is a thicker version of I, where it becomes like, this is mine and I want it, and if you don't give it to me, I'm gonna club you on the head, or I will respond to you in afflictive negative ways. This is the I that we have to counter by bringing wisdom in the bigger space, because we need to know that that's not all we are. That small mind can only happen within the vast, limitless space of consciousness. Spaciousness and luminosity. Luminosity meaning the cognizant nature. We don't need a conceptual mind to know I am here. I don't need conceptual mind to know that I love you. I don't need to say. Now, on the other hand, if you're going to say, I love you because you're rich and you have this and you have this and you have this, then you're using your ordinary mind. But to simply know, I love you, or I am here, you are here, we do not need that small, tight conceptual mind. Conceptual mind is like a hand, and it should be used. It helps us survive. It helps us with practical tasks, but it's not ever adequate for other things concerning life, and to live a more fulfilled and a more luminous kind of a life. So we need to know the mechanisms when this very, very kind of a substantiated, tight me that because of ignorance, we think that that is all that we are. That's what Michael referred to is not knowing our true nature. That really is the cause of suffering, you know. How do we know that we're acting from that space as opposed to our awareness, a larger sense of awareness? Well, it's very simple. It's just like the breath, you know. When we get frightened, our breath becomes our chest becomes tight, our breath becomes fast, our body changes, our speech changes, everything changes. So we need to start to learn about these mechanisms. We need to know when and because of what, the triggers and the hooks which lead to negative emotions, hatred, uh, attachment, desire, you know, crazy appetites, addictions, jealousy, competitiveness, all these kinds of things. Because as I said, ignorance is really not an emotion. It has to do with this not knowing our true nature, our bigger nature. When we're afraid, emotional, when we are sad, the energy of awareness contracts. It becomes very, very small, very, very tight. It shrinks. It can become so contracted and so dark that it can lead to deep depression and even suicide. It's like having, as I said to a friend of mine yesterday, I said, it's like having a hurricane that has only one escape through the keyhole. It's gonna break the house. That's what's gonna happen when we encapsulate the energy of the mind into a small, tight space, the ego, the emotions. Because in those kind of mental states, it's always me, I'm hurting, I'm this. And at some point we lose track and we don't know how to get out of it. So really, it's like if we have that energy in a small space, in a small house, and there's only that keyhole in the door through which that hurricane can go out, we really literally need to lift the roof of the house if we want to save the house. And then that energy can evaporate. So we need to learn how these mechanisms feel, the sensations, the smell, the feeling, just like we know other things. We know when we're in love, so we know when we're sad, and when that sadness starts to become more collapsed and more tighter and becomes poisonous. You know, when we're angry, everything goes crazy in our body, everything shrinks, everything is like, oh my God, that person wants to hurt me. We should become very familiar. On the other hand, when we're spacious and we're connected to others, especially with love, uh, we expand. Our space of awareness expands. We have large awareness, we have large space, we have lots of energy. So it's collapsed space, lack of energy, loneliness, despair. That's how we know where our mind is. Or the opposite. We're connected, we feel free, we feel good, and we have compassion and love in those kinds of states. We have to know these kinds of things. And especially, you know, we have to watch out against these collapsed, dark mental states. We have to guard against them. We have to know them. How do we get to do that? Well, we have to become very familiar with them. That's what we do in meditation. We sit down and we familiarize instead of pushing it away and going, it's his fault, he made me do it, da 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 da. You know, by that time you've been hijacked by these labels. You really are not capable of stopping that energy. You're not capable of changing that energy. And that's catastrophic because ultimately you're still going to be in the same place, you know, lifetimes from today. So this is what practice is for. It's for us to transform ourselves, not to be swayed like a little, you know, leaf on the gigantic oceanic waves. These waves are us. It's our energy. Those tsunami waves, we allow them or not allow them. We have to work with these tsunami waves. Those tsunami waves could also be transformed and become practice and become compassion and can be used toward beneficial things instead of killing and destroying ourselves and annihilating everything in the circumference of where that energy from us extends. So this is what we need to do. When we're lost and trapped in our thoughts and emotions, we cannot see the openness, the freshness of our possibilities, and we don't have the light of our awareness that shows us all the space in which these possibilities can unfold. So there are practical steps. What do? We take stock of difficult situations and we must resolve to change them drastically. We really have to make a commitment, just like we take a commitment to practice. That is a commitment to practice. When you say to yourself, I have a situation from which I cannot walk away, with a difficult parent or a difficult child, or someone that you love that you cannot abandon, but the situation is very difficult, very toxic. This is the time when a commitment has to be made. We're not changing them, we're changing ourselves. We're practicing on ourselves. And I guarantee you that if you take down the flame and they're not getting burned by you, you're not adding fire to their fire, things will change, things will transform. When you're dealing with a very difficult situation, with a very difficult person, and not only just, difficult person who hates you and for the moment now, all you can do is hate them too. Also dealing with difficult situations like death and loss and all kinds of different things. Breathe in the light into the dark and difficult situations, and literally do the visualization using your life force. Don't just have it as an idea. Ideas are like candy wrappers. They're insubstantial. Words, they're insubstantial. Our energy is what matters. Don't pay attention to the words, the labels. Pay attention to the energy. It's not what you said. It's the energy with which you say. Sometimes someone can say, I love you, and it's like a knife into your heart, because the intentionality and the quality of the energy is all that ever matters. And the words attain different meaning depending on the energy with which they arise and from the source that they arise. In difficult situations, expand your space and change the darkness of the ego compression. Try to step out. Try to first put a full stop on everything, then look. And if right now you don't have enough energy of awareness to deal with it skillfully, walk away. Go to the cushion and try to exercise this scenario. Say to yourself, how am I going to change this situation? And vow that you will change the situation, because we really do have to commit to the path. We have to put out emotional fires. We have to reprogram the triggers. We have to know that the next time that person says that thing, that we're not going to react the same way. We're going to know those words, but we're going to hear them as like a bell that reminds us, okay, stop. Don't get hooked. Act with awareness. Expand. Don't contract and burst, Get a strategical position and remember your nature. Remember, you don't have to react. We can act. We have the bigger space. We don't have to have the hurricane in a tight little spot. That's really not all we are. Nobody can force us into that. Only we give ourselves permission to act from that place. What is the opposite of difficult emotions? Wisdom. Wisdom is spaciousness and luminosity. Wisdom is knowing that we have this conceptual mind, this little tight sphere, and then we have this big thing of possibilities. Within that bigger space, that's really our nature, we can create and carve new pathways. We can determine who and what we're going to be. Our parents can press us into all kinds of things. Our spouses can press us into all kinds of things, but somehow we manage to find our way. Sometimes we find our way to good things and sometimes we find our way to bad things, but only to illustrate we carve our own paths, even despite the weight of public opinion. Everything that surrounds us right now, everything that we are right now, happened as a result of our choices. Even when we say, I had no choice, that's also a decision that we take. Work with anger to understand it. Sometimes anger is directed towards others, sometimes it's directed towards oneself, it's self-hatred. In Buddhism, it doesn't matter whether the ego, whether the ego says he's not good, she's not good, or I'm not good. In Buddhism, it's all the same. It's about working with the energy and awareness. The awareness understands this energy and it's going to redirect and transform it. The awareness sees that energy as something toxic and horrendous that's just about to explode. And that awareness says, no, stop. I'm going to do something else with it. I will not allow this fire to burst out and burn the whole apartment. I'm going to throw that fire into a little metal garbage can, or I'm just going to put that out in the ashtray. That's how we work with awareness. That's what meditation is. That's really what meditation is. Awareness. And don't be swindled by the ego. If you get into this narrative, I know I should do this, I know that I shouldn't react, I know I shouldn't say bad things to that guy, but if you say I know but, like Garchen Rinpoche says, you've been swindled by the ego. That means that the narrative took you out. That's it. You're gone. That means you weren't able to stop, hold, and redirect, and diffuse, and act out of wisdom and clarity. That, the narrative took you out, and reaction comes right after that, because the way the ego works is that it gives itself permission through these different narratives. But he's so bad and I should do this to him, or I should have his house because he's, whatever. We get fooled into these things. And remember, every time we act out of ego and the afflictions, we create karma. So we have already created causes and seeds for suffering that are around the corner, or the next year, or shortly after that we will have to experience. Our family will have to experience it, because when we experience things, those near us experience them too. Instead, when you're dealing with a difficult situation, inhale, use practice. Inhale luminosity, exhale luminosity. Or inhale their dark and give them the light. And change the formula, change everything. Take that energy and make it yours. Act, don't react, learn it. If you've been hijacked by the narrative and you did get angry and you reacted in your normal habitual way, please don't waste time and being angry at yourself, because all you're doing is not seeing it with awareness, but you're solidifying more negative behaviors and their patterns. Please don't waste time and amplify these negative habits even further. Work with what you have. Be honest. Say to yourself, this is where I am right now, but I promise when I meet that person at another time, he won't trigger me the same way. I will not succumb to that. You vow, just like you vow to sit down and do the meditation practice, how you vow to go to college, or how you vow to raise your kids, or how you vow to do all the other things that are really important and good in your life. You vow the same way to dismantle this energy that will bring you and everyone around you nothing but suffering and causes of suffering. Suffering that's not here yet, but will definitely come, because if we created the seeds, we created the causes. So we can't really kind of think just because it didn't happen, like in this instant, I screamed at him, but he didn't punch me, that the causes of suffering passed by. It just kind of went by my door. No, we will meet that cause of suffering at another occasion. We actually may meet that cause of suffering from our child or from someone we love, because we plant that cause of suffering by acting on hatred, by acting on these things. And hatred and envy and grasping and the attachment, they're very, very, very sticky. They're very, very difficult. So please be patient with yourself when you practice. If you see that you failed, next time say, okay, maybe I'll contract that period. Maybe I'll expand that period, and I'll contract the fury with which I react until I can completely diminish and instead of the fire have water and flowers. I won't let that person trigger me the same way. Work with yourself. Be honest, be sincere. Know when you messed up. Know when you simply reacted. Know when you were hijacked by the ego narrative. At the same time, be patient with yourself. Be hard with yourself in the sense of being aware, not beating yourself. That's doing the same thing you did when you acted on anger. Beating yourself is doing exactly the same kind of a thing we're trying to dismantle here. At the same time, be aware that as a practitioners, our minds are like a 1-year-old child. So we have to be patient, and we have to be very careful with this little seedling of our intentions and our meditation practice. We have to know that we have countless lives where we acted contrary to this life of consciousness and compassion. So now that we have this little seedling, we have to be very, very careful with it because it's very frail. And, the seedling cannot cope with giant problems. Like our teacher Rinpoche says, Garchen Rinpoche says, when the fire of awareness is small, don't put a whole tree into it. Put like little kindlings until the fire of awareness becomes bigger. And when your fire of awareness, meaning your wisdom, grows, you can deal with anything, but do it in stages and know yourself and be patient and use the same logic toward others. Say, okay, he was very angry and he did very, very bad things, but I will talk to him and I will pray for him and I will do Tonglen for him. And then the dark will diminish and the light will expand. We have to use the pure view toward everyone, including ourselves. We have all Buddha nature, irrelevant of where we are and what we're doing right now. The two methods that we deal with negative emotions in Buddhism, it is said that for the highest practitioners, meaning when our wisdom is very ripe and the space of consciousness and luminosity is vast, at that point, there's no such thing as an enemy. When somebody comes with us, we kind of we can deal with it, and we can also laugh at it because we see it, we know it as karma, But this highest level of dealing with obstacles is called liberation, where you can simply just you take that energy and you transform it completely, and there's no such thing as you acting on a negative impulse. There are also no impulses. But before we get to that stage, we use a practice that's called transform. So we transform. How do we transform? Well, we stop, we look, and we decide. And, because practice is such an individual thing, practice in Buddhism is not one book that's given to us and we follow the rules. No, we're given the teachings and then we go into practice. And for each one of us, practice is individual. It's what we need, and it's how we ripen, how we mature. Michael gave me a great technique, and he said, a long time ago, he said when he meets difficult people, he puts Garchen Rinpoche's face on them. So when you meet a difficult person from whom you can't just walk away, but with whom you do have to interact, a difficult boss, a difficult child, a difficult parent, put a face of someone you love on them. Use visualization technique. Use that technique and see what it does to your energy. Whatever techniques that you need not to explode, whatever techniques you want to use, not to have the hurricane destroy your house. Make an opening, create a big crack, let that energy, that wind get out, and then restructure it and use it in a different way. Don't get hooked. Whenever you feel these contractions, you smell how you're gonna get already. You kind of can always tell you're gonna answer in a very bad way. Don't permit yourself. Stop, hold, breathe in, breathe out, and decide. And so that's what I wanted to touch on. Become very aware, know your difficult feelings, because only when we know them and we make them our friends, when they become very intimate, as long as we're pushing them away, we cannot even hope for any kind of transformation. Only when we know them and we also are aware that we want to replace them, we want to dedicate our life to living a life of consciousness and light, we can make these transformations. We have Buddha nature. We have brought things from emptiness and luminosity, which is our awareness, all our life. We were able to do all these other things. So we must always know and be aware of this support, that we have the innate ability. We only really need to decide that that's what we want to do. And once we do that, and also, like Michael said in the beginning of the class, don't worry about the final result. Worry about this next little step. If you can make the next little step and it could be successful, then the next little step that is successful, that is what we call the path. We don't call it, the end stop. We call it the path. For a Buddhist, life is the path. So it's putting one foot in front of the other. And that's how we practice, and I hope that it helps.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there's any. I just got into AA looking to connect with higher power without alcohol. Do you remember when you first got connected to yours? What was that experience like? Not necessarily. I don't necessarily remember. I mean, what's important is I think it's very similar to what we're talking about here. Like we've been sold kind of a cheap bill of goods. You know what I mean? That we're only this, and in reality, when we talk about ultimate truth and ignorance and not knowing our true nature, it's so much bigger. So whatever you want to, however, in AA they say, however you define your higher power. And in AA, it's not just about, it's primarily to stop drinking, but it's a spiritual path, basically is the 12 steps is definitely a spiritual path. And to do that, you have to go beyond yourself. And that's what's important. This is my very first time meditating. It was so amazing. What are the best next steps? Do it again. Often, do it often. Really make it a habit. Keep doing it.
Make it a habit and start to connect to the more silent, open, luminous part of your mind, not just the busy conceptual mind.
Observation. I started the path is the goal. I love its view that the quest is the reward. It's very different than our typical dualistic approach to life where scorekeeping is eternal. We win or lose. We do or do not. Trumpa's view is a refreshing way of reframing our approach to life and giving us space, continual improvement, no matter how incremental is profound. Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for sharing that. Maya, thank you for your continued guidance and sharing details of recommended teachers. I've found these resources very useful and went on to Zigor Control Rinpoche's website, where I access Jampal Norbu's Every Bodhi podcast, which focuses on Lojong training including Tonglen practice, that Victoria introduced us to it has meant such a lot to be able to deepen my practice by accessing the resources of these trusted teachers. Thank you for you guys. Yeah, that's a if if you do one thing, I mean, meditation obviously goes without saying. We're doing that. That's why you have. But if you do one other thing, it's find teachers, find a teacher, find teachers. Zigor Control Rinpoche, DZIGARKONGTRUL Rinpoche is a great one. But I post a lot of them on my Instagram stories. I have them in my hashtags when I post, and there's the Pema Lotus Instagram page. Shambhala Books, SHAMBHALA. Shambhala Publishing has a great catalog of lots of Tibetan Buddhist teachers as well, and great ones. But that's the source, and that's where you're going to find the teachings. If you can find a teacher and take refuge, if you're inspired to, there's nothing better than that, really. And let's dedicate the merit from today's practice for the benefit of all beings, as we do every week. By this merit may all beings attain a state of enlightenment, conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves, birth, old age, sickness, and death. Going to AA, the 12th step of AA, which is the final step, is you have to help others in a way. And in some ways, it's a little bit similar to what we just did. So we end our practice today by dedicating the merit to the benefit of all beings. So I think that's an interesting side note. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Victoria, for your Dharma talk today, and for Nick Solidio, our producer, whom without we would not be here. See you next week.